Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second webinar of our 6-event Marketing Science webinar series. Today's session is all about using content to leverage virtual events. Now, before we introduce our guests, just a quick reminder about how you can get the most out of today's session. Firstly, this webinar is being recorded and resources will be made available following the event. We want you to take full advantage of this interactive webinar, so please send any questions or thoughts and comments to us via the private chats or the Q&A tabs at any time. You can also take a look at the handouts tab where you'll find various resources. We'll be running a number of audience polls during the webinar and a survey at the end, so please do get involved and share your perspectives with us. Finally, if you do happen to experience any technical issues during the event, the easy fix tends to be a simple refresh of your browser. However, if this doesn't work and you continue to have issues, just use the chat box to communicate your issues with our team, and we'll help to get you back up and running as quickly as possible. Now, without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce our guests for today. Firstly, Andy Henton, CEO of Inside Scientific. Inside Scientific is the online environment built for life science researchers, focused on producing educational webinars, workshops, and digital resources that help researchers do their best science. Andy, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, Danny. Thanks for asking, and I'm very happy to be here.
That's great. And secondly, Michelle Nichols, president of Launch Team. Launch Team provides marketing, change management, and product launch strategy and execution for high-tech, optics, photonics, medical device, and services companies looking to grow sales, enter new markets, and create competitive advantage. Michelle, great to have you with us today.
Good morning. Thanks for including me.
And finally, Rocco Pacella, Marketing and Communications Manager from Pitcom. Their mission is advancing and enriching scientific endeavor by connecting scientists worldwide, facilitating the exchange of research and ideas, showcasing the latest in laboratory innovation, and funding science education and outreach. They will also be hosting their first fully virtual conference in March of this year, and we'll be touching on that throughout today's session. Rocco, great to have you with us.
Thanks, Danny. Glad to be here.
So welcome to all of you, and thank you to everyone here for giving up their time, and to the three speakers for giving us the opportunity to listen and learn from their expertise. My name is Daniel Azel from AZO Network, and I'll be putting the questions to our guests today. And before we get started with that, we're going to dive straight in with our first poll. So we just want to quickly know how many virtual events you're planning on attending in 2021. We're assuming you'll be attending some. So that poll should be appearing on your screen any moment now. And whilst that's coming up, in the registration process, we asked a number of questions about your experiences with virtual events so far. And as you can see from the graphs on screen, there's people obviously attending them, but there's been a sort of a mixed response to how they found them. Michelle, I want to bring you in first on this. What are the sort of different challenges that people you've spoken to have experienced over the last 12 months since virtual events became a sort of a necessity?
It's time and attention. When I would travel to a conference, I've packed, I've prepped, I know what I want out of that, and I've blocked time on my calendar. We sit down to a virtual event with the best of intentions and have 40 tabs open. There's also this sameness. Everything is slick, well done, attractive, and on screens. We're looking at screens all day long, so we're lacking that sensory experience we get from a trade show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And Andy, the results just come in from the poll. So the 68% 1 to 5, 29% 6 to 10. So people are obviously planning ahead, and they've got lots coming up over the next sort of few months. What are the challenges you've experienced from the people you've been speaking to, the virtual events you might have put on?
Yeah, it's a really good question. What comes to mind for me is mindset. And so, very similar to what you've mentioned, Michelle, virtual is not in person, but the expectations need to be in line with what virtual events can offer. So, and this goes for both, attendees and sponsors. People have to take responsibility for being committed to the program online and working to get what they're looking for out of it. So, and why this is a challenge is, if we think about it, we have an online behavior, if you will, right? Or an online persona, and it tends to be a little bit more anonymous, right? We browse and we explore and we do things at our own pace. An in-person meeting, you really are immersed in it. You have to be, and it comes more natural, if you will. So the challenge is, how can we help people embrace this mindset of how to be online and how to get the most out of a virtual event? I think that's a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it was sort of thrown at us overnight. So, Rocco, your PickCon 2019 was the last sort of in-person industry conference that I think went ahead. So you've had almost a year now to get used to what's going on. So how are you guys at PickCon organizing to sort of tackle these challenges that people have experienced?
Yeah, so PickCon 2020 was the last science show that we know of. A week later, we were in Chicago, and a week later, Chicago essentially shut down. The United States began to shut down. So, we have had a long time to, conduct our research, go to other shows. And I think, as far as, getting over the challenges that we're facing, there's what Andy touched on, which I believe was, allowing people to plan ahead, for these things. And I think beyond that, we're battling a lot of the, not so great shows that occurred that, sort of like just put together something hastily, thrown onto a virtual environment that really existed well in a live in-person show. And it didn't translate to virtual. We're seeing a lot of virtual fatigue too. So different things that we're looking at is, we're looking to provide genuine means of engagement to our attendees. Those could be live networking sessions. Those can be, we have little virtual excursions, live booth chats, something as simple as that. We have different affinity group mixers. Basically, all of these things are providing live human elements to a virtual show, right? So you're allowing people to interact, and by interacting with other real people, they're more likely to stay in the environment that you've created for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the humanizing of the events is the key. We talked last week's webinar. We talked a little bit about some of the features of the platforms. Matchmaking was one that we talked about, which seemed really popular. I know, Michelle, you've had some experience with events that have been using matchmaking, AI facilitated matchmaking. What are your thoughts on that?
I think when it's feasible, I've seen it be done beautifully. Attendees can prep, put in their profile and what they're looking for from out of that event, and be matched with people that meet their interests in these 10-minute meetings. And that's a really natural substitute for networking, for that kind of spontaneous thing that may happen at a live conference. It gives you something to briefly explore and then follow up later. I think moderators can do a lot to improve the quality of those events, those breakouts, by deciding to be outgoing and to inspire interesting conversation. Attendees will get a lot more out of those events.
Michelle, that's a great point about moderation in these breakout rooms. You need to make that part of the plan, or it'll fall flat on its face. It's not just about having the opportunity to network. It's about having mechanisms built into the show that draw people in and help them get comfortable, if you will. Because I think for most, a lot of this it's not so natural. And that goes back to that mindset I was mentioning. It's like, most, I would say, in the technology industries are introverts as well. Like, Michelle, I think I've heard you say that we cater typically to the introvert, right, in our industry.
We design for it.
Right. So So I agree with you 100% there. I mean, to have successful breakout rooms, to have successful networking events, you need to identify who is that extrovert or who are those groups of extroverts that will make that still also get rolling, keep rolling, bring people in, so that when those guests leave, those attendees leave, they say that was fantastic. Help them achieve what we're really trying to give them. I think it's a simple way to say it.
It's a bit more of an onus on the organizer. We won't meet people in line for coffee.
Right.
We've got to design for it.
Yeah. There's no more serendipitous opportunities, where we meet. Serendipitous networking, I guess we could call it. It's got to be much more purposeful and designed online. Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, and I just wanted to bring it, so we've looked at what the organizers can do. A lot of our audience today is obviously marketers who will be attending these events. So Andy, I'll bring you back in. What can they do to, in terms of the content to leverage virtual events, what can they be doing planning wise and creating that content?
Yeah, this is a fantastic question. And I think it starts with understanding that the virtual event is just one of many, a path that you need to create. You're ultimately, the best practice would be look at this as a campaign that starts weeks, if not months before the virtual event, and also continues after. So devise a plan, work the plan. That's tip number one. And because the theme of this webinar is also content, I think that's where, again, we're still online for all of that. So we have to think, what content can we create before to create awareness around what this event might provide to people, right? You want to draw people in, you want to get them to your talks, you want to get them to your booth. So I also think part of this plan has to be looking at creating unique content, and then bringing people into an experience as part of the virtual meeting that offers exclusive content. Because the other failure here is providing the same old within your virtual meeting space. If you do that as a marketer, all you've done is create a small microsite to what is available on your website, and your results will be underwhelming. So exclusive, authentic content is key, pretty much across the board, is start, middle, and finish. And then, as I say, that the strategy here on content also after, I think is really important. The plan, in my opinion, should take people through a journey of awareness and education, some exclusive interaction at your virtual event, if you will, your booth, your talks, and then that final stage needs to be another level of, more direct connection with them. I'm biased, but webinars work great for this, right? So you qualify, you meet new leads, you connect with existing ones at a virtual experience. But after that, you should be planning what's the next thing that we want you to come to that dives a little deeper, right, into education on products, applications, etc. So you really need to look at it as a campaign.
Yeah, and I know we're going to touch on it later about the data you get available from virtual events that you don't necessarily into face-to-face, and how you can determine where they are in the cycle to determine what you're going to do next. So if they're just reading around for the first time, we're not going to throw them straight into a demo or into a sales call, but we might be nurturing them a little bit further. And the data we get from these events, when did so-and-so read this, how long did he read it for, how long did he watch this video, is fantastic for us to be able to do that. Michelle, Andy was speaking about it being part of the wider sort of campaign cycle. So any additional thoughts on that?
Sure. You can almost think of the event as a deadline, a midpoint in your campaign. It was always partially your responsibility to draw prospects to your booth. Even more so true now. So social media, have something new to talk about. This is still a good way to launch new products. Timing a product launch for a virtual event. We've always seen great results from going live on social media at a trade show or a conference and unveiling a product with a teaser campaign beforehand. That still works now. New things to talk about, new capabilities, multi-layer content, recognizing that our attention spans have shrunk. Have the 30-second video to a tech poster, to a white paper, each sort of recognizing where they are in the stage. It's just being in tune with what the prospect is interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think it gives marketers this really good opportunity to think out the box. They've had to adapt. They've had to be flexible with their approach. So lots of opportunities to think of innovative ways that are going to get people excited about visiting their booths and other things. I want to come on to the virtual booth, and just on the point of people's attention spans, to make sure everyone's still with us, we're going to launch the second poll, which is all about what type of content works best in your virtual booth. So that should be appearing on your screen any moment now. And whilst we're answering that, we've had a great question come in from Anne Carroll. She's asked, we had virtual events where people might visit the booth, but they do not come into the live booth chat. How do you draw them in? Rocco, I'll come to you with this. And also, if you could talk a little bit about what content works well in virtual booths as well, that would be great.
Yeah, I think drawing people into your booth is a two-pronged approach, maybe. I think that the show organizer has a responsibility to put in mechanisms to draw people to the booth. I mean, that's on us. But I think that there's a lot that the exhibitor can do to help drive that traffic to their booth. There's two ways. There's the content that's within your booth. There's also the promotion that you do pre-show and maybe in-show. Because let's face it, with virtual, people don't have to register. There's no deadline to register. They can register the day of or, the third day of the show. So any promotion is going to help there. You want to show people your booth that are outside of the element. I think that's going to help them draw in, because that's just promoting some sort of difference with what they're going to visit and maybe who they can talk to in there. So I'll transition here to the content that you have within your booth, and I'll echo what Michelle said about videos. 30 seconds, you said. Yes, I'm all for the 30-second video, but some people will argue me and say 60-second. If it's a good video, it's 60-second. But I know that we've spoken before about the content within that video, what it looks like. And I think we mentioned before a few minutes ago in this webinar how there needs to be a human element to these videos. So we're not looking at an overly corporate video, quote unquote corporate video. You need something that people are really going to resound with, especially in the virtual, right? Like maybe an interruption, or maybe they're just sitting there. Some of us are in our homes right now. We're in our office here. Something that people can resound with. That's simply just going to draw them in. A lot of platforms, ours included, I know. When you go into the booth, the video automatically plays. You don't want to have a 20-minute video there. You want to draw people in, maybe almost introduce them to the company if they don't know the company, or just the people there, right? And then you're engaging them with that. The people that are going to stay, you need to give them something to click on, a PDF document, something. We're looking at the Ozo booth right now, marketing reports, right? Take your SEO health check as an engagement mechanism, but maybe some people that are visiting your booth, in our case, it's scientific instrumentation, need the tech specs, right? They need to be able to read this stuff, and they're going to stay there. But further, that they need to talk to a real person, right? So it's not just putting the salespeople in there or the marketing people in there. I mean, that's great. I like being in the booth, but I think people need to talk to the experts that actually make, in our case, the instrumentation, right? They need to ask these questions. Why can't they just visit the website? Well, they're visiting this booth because they can ask those questions directly to the person. Even better if it's a live chat, right? Yeah. And then I know finally, I always say that this sounds a little silly, but I think having avatars there, I know that these avatars that are in the Azo booth are just placeholders, so I can't wait to see, Danny's avatar and Frankie's avatar and Rolf's avatar and Michaela's avatar, all from the Azo team there. But I think people are really drawn in, maybe subconsciously, to a smiling face of a real person that works at the company, that they have chosen to give their time to interacting with in that virtual environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll be heading straight over to hair and makeup after this, and then having my avatar photo taken. So, well, maybe not so much hair, but makeup definitely. So yeah, I think that's a really, the avatars is an amazing way, because as you can see, this is our first draft on the screen at the moment for what we've put together for PigCon in a couple of weeks. And yeah, so it's a bit all over the place at the moment. We've got some things to add in, and the avatars is one of them. And it is something that is a point of difference. If you have existing relationships, it's that familiarity as well. And yeah, the short videos on the screens is a great way of engaging people. We're going to try a welcome video at our booth, which is very personal, not sort of high-tech video production, but very personal and to the point. Andy, I'll bring you in. The poll results are showing that most people think short video less than a minute is the way forward, which I'd absolutely agree with. How important is it to make sure they are authentic and not too commercialized?
I'm going to answer that question, but first I want to go back to Anne's. Something came to mind, the way she's written the question, and thanks for the question, Anne, was how do we get people in? And we talked a bit about getting them in your booth. I'm curious if she's asking about how we get them to actually activate the chat. And I've had a couple of conversations with clients about this, and I just wanted to touch on it, that one of the challenges, if you say, like, we're here, chat with us, the reality is we haven't allowed the attendee, the visitor, to understand, well, what would they chat with you about? What's unique about chatting with you versus someone else? And so you need to lay things out in the virtual a little bit more plainly and clearly and lead people in. So so Rocco, you had mentioned about short videos and the fact that also virtual allows us to connect with ultimately potentially the entire company instead of just the people we put on the plane, sent there, and we're there to represent the company. That's a huge value add. But it's hard for someone to know I should, click on Andy's avatar unless they know what is my specialty. So answering this question about authentic content, going back to your question, Danny, but exclusive content and specialized content for your virtual experience is create short videos that explain your role at the company. I'm a specialist that handles this. I've got a background in this application. If that's your area of expertise, I'm here to talk. Hit my app or hit the chat with me. I'm available, or book a meeting even. But we can't just say to a visitor, connect with us if you're interested. There's not enough detail there. Our online behavior will not activate us to say, well, I should just be the extrovert here and shout, I've got a question about this and I really want to talk to people. It's not the way we act online. So be a little bit, Anne, I would recommend be as detailed as you possibly can with content that they can interact with, so that if that person is highly interested, they know who they should click on to talk to if it's set up that way, or at least they know who they should ask for if it's generalized chat. I'd really like to connect with Andy or Sue or Bill, whomever is detailed on your profile. That would be my recommendation. Authentic content, Danny, just a comment there is I'm a big fan of it because we work with a lot of small, medium-sized companies, and sometimes there's a bit of fear of creating video content, which was obviously popular in our poll and is popular in general in digital marketing and this year of lockdown and constantly being on screens. Very effective way to learn, but small companies might hesitate to create video because they think they need a production crew. They think they need, the equivalent of like a Lord of the Rings production here before they take it live, and you don't. You need perhaps just a smartphone, one of those gimbals or holding devices so it's not shaking all over the place, and some very inexpensive lighting you can order on Amazon or some online supplier. And you can set an office up to do a nice walkthrough of a product or introduce yourself and talk about what you do. And these are authentic videos in which they offer enough polish to represent your company and your brand well, but they get your message across, and then they can be consumed and snacked on by the people coming through your booth. So that's my favorite for how to kit out an actual virtual booth with some exclusive and authentic content, because it's achievable.
Yeah, Michelle, what's the best sort of content you've seen in virtual booths, or any other suggestions you'd have for the people listening today?
Sure. I think it was a learning curve for all of us to get over that barrier of being good on video and into understanding how much more important it was to be approachable and real and an expert in our own space. So I think these are all moves in the right direction. And companies are also struggling with what a product demo looks like now. And they need to figure that out in both a live and a recorded video kind of way. And that can just be talking to the instrument, kind of walking around, answering top customer questions, as long as that's brief. In some cases, it needs to be screenshots of the UI. Whatever it may mean, it's really important to your sales cycle to figure out at this point.
Perhaps a recommendation, and the simple one, is think about all the things you try to achieve in a booth and figure out how to reproduce that in different media formats that are short and sharp and clearly identified, so people know I click on this video to learn this, I engage that document to learn that, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Rocco, just to finish up on the virtual booth, any tips for us before we submit our final booth ahead of the event? I'll bring it back on screen.
Avatars, Danny. I want to see the avatars. I've met you guys all. I miss you guys that I'm not going to see this year. We were originally going to be in New Orleans, so at least give me that.
Okay, I promise we'll work on that very soon. They'll be live and up there. I just wanted to move the chat on to a different topic. So I wanted to talk about the mindset of organizers, the mindset of attendees, and how important that is when attending virtual events. Andy, I'll come to you first. It's massive, isn't it? It's really important that we have a really good mindset before part of our planning and whilst attending the virtual event as well.
Yeah. Well, and if we just look at this as literally attending the events, right? We need to step out of our typical online behavior and our online culture, and we need to acknowledge that there's some responsibility, as Michelle said earlier. There's responsibility on people to get what they want. So the mindset is really identifying to yourself, why am I here? If it's a free event, why have I committed my time? If it's a paid event, why have I also push forward my hard-earned money to say I want something out of this? So think about it. I think it comes natural without thought in a way when you go to an in-person meeting, because you fly there. There's like this ritual or routine of like committing yourself, clearing off your calendar because you're like, oh, I'm in Chicago next week doing this, or New Orleans. You really are highly focused on everything you can get out of that event and that experience over, say, 3-4 days. Our online behaviors don't operate that way. Our computer screens are multiple in our homes. Typically, you got more than one. You've got your tablets, your smartphone providing access. So while these are great things, it means that I think the natural thing is to approach it of, well, I don't have to think about it. I don't have to commit necessarily the same way. So it's critical that attendees do it as well, especially before drawing judgment, I think, on their virtual experience. I've seen this a bit, and I don't think it's fair. I think attendees need to own up and say, before I pass judgment on my experience at a virtual event, I'm going to make sure that I'm committed to getting everything I can. With vendors, or those that might be in a booth and looking to garner leads, it's the same thing. We need to adjust our mindset to align with what the platform can provide. This goes back to planning. And then we need to work that experience, right? We need to step out of our comfort zone, think of new ways to connect with people. You can't just show up online and expect everyone to run to your virtual booth and click the chat with me button. It's not going to happen. So mindset's critical.
Yeah, I think during the registration questions, one of the most interesting responses was someone they'd attended plenty of virtual events already, and they'd said the ones that we put all the effort and the planning in, we got good results, and the one we didn't. And I thought, well, that's obvious. But then I thought about it a bit more, and it's true. You've got so many distractions when you're working from home. You could have kids running around, dogs barking in the background, a million tabs open, homeschooling, whatever it is you're doing. You have all these distractions. So, Michelle, I guess, is it important when people are attending these events that they block off time, they put all those distractions aside, and they say, right, this is my 5 hours at PigCon this year, like you would do at an in-person event? Or is that even
Best they can.
realistic?
Yes,
Sorry.
they need to own their own experience.
Yeah.
And if they are torn half a dozen ways, like many of us are, then it's ever more important to know what you want out of that.
Yeah.
What are you here to do? Are you here to learn about a specific technology? Are you here to connect with a speaker or meet some peers in a certain area of research? Whatever that may be, know it going in. And all of marketing, truly, this is a scientific community. Marketing is an experiment. It's a measured experiment. This virtual event is no less so. We control the variables we can, and that's planning and solid content, and then we measure it. So the more of those things that are within their control, the more they'll get out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think perhaps one of the challenges has been that virtual events have been on various different platforms. And Rocco, I know that you guys have done a lot of, sort of pre-preparation for PitCon, getting the attendees to come to events where you train them about how to get the most out of their experience. From an organizer's point of view, what's the most important thing in terms of mindset?
I think that mindset internally speaks very much so to organizational culture. And if you do not organizationally have a culture that values innovation, you're going to be dead in the water with these things. I mean, we've all been to shows that have simply been content put onto a website. Maybe it looked a little bit like a virtual show, but essentially it was content put up on a website. We've been to those shows. We've stayed in those shows for 30 minutes, maybe. So we owe it to the people participating and attending our show to perpetuate our own culture, to impart our own culture of innovation on them. We have to be willing internally to try new things, to innovate, to take risks with these virtual things, because everybody, again, as we said before, virtual fatigue. We've all been to the same show. How are we going to be different? And how are we going to then use that difference to provide that benefit in messaging to the people that we want to come to our show? Exhibitors, lecturers, attendees, right? That then goes one further to create sort of this mindset of enrichment, because we're a conference that is collaborative, right? We are a conference that shares science, essentially. We want our attendees, everybody in our platform, to feel an enrichment, a sense of gaining knowledge within our platform. And then beyond that, a sense of engagement. So we're looking at not only providing them just the lectures, not only just the booths, the exhibit work, but we want them to engage with others within the platform. I think that the measure of that, for me at least, is if an attendee could tell me that for a split second they lost track of time in our virtual environment, or that they left a lecture and didn't check their email, then that's a successful show for me. That is a successful transfer of internal organizational mindset to external customer mindset. That's all.
Absolutely. Rocco, I'm gonna bring you back in a second for the next question, but just wanted to quickly remind the audience that if you do have any questions, any thoughts about what we're saying, please do drop that into the Q&A box, and we'll try and get to them throughout the session or at the end of the webinar today. So Rocco, I'm going to come back to you, and I think the main concern people exhibiting have is, how do you organizers ensure there's a good flow of traffic from the conferences to the virtual booths? We can obviously take some of the responsibility by making sure we've got something to come to, but how can organizers help with that flow of traffic?
Yeah, I know that it's on both of us. It's on the organizers as much as it is on, I believe, the exhibitors at the show. I think that it's a collaborative effort. I think that, it's one of the most challenging aspects of a virtual show, is to draw people in, because people are going to, in a lot of cases, to hear lectures, to hear the special presentations, the keynote lecture, whatever. We want to essentially, our job is to keep people engaged in the show, because simply put, if they're there long enough, if they are interested in the show and stay there, then they are more likely to visit all other aspects of the show. So things that we've put in place, obviously we've been promoting it, and you tell people, in our case, people want to know who's exhibiting at our show. I do not see a lot of shows doing that. People want to know the instrumentation company at PitCon. That's simple messaging, right? That's to get people to commit to even going. But once they're there, as we spoke about before, they need human-like interactive elements to keep them engaged in the show. So we have, networking sessions that are live, that are Andy moderated, you said earlier.
Yep. Yeah, that's great.
We have, virtual excursions. One that always sticks in my mind is PitCon 2021 was supposed to be in New Orleans. So we have the people from the New Orleans Visitors Bureau who've been great through all of this. They've given us a few tours. Someone that is a famous Louisiana chef is going to be one of these virtual excursions. And, that's really, it's giving people a break. It's giving people a break and saying, hey, between lectures, stick around for this 15, 20-minute thing. And you've got 10 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, maybe an hour to waste before your next lecture. Well, guess what? Here's the expo too. We have affinity group sessions, affinity group mixers, we're calling them, excuse me. And those are meant for, we have tracks where, they're industry sectors that we focus on at PitCon. So if you're in the food science and agriculture industry sector, well, after this lecture, there's going to be a food science and agriculture group where all of these people, these analytical chemists that come from around the world can sit and discuss these things. In the end, we're a collaborative show, if you boil it down to one word, and we want to provide that to the people that are attending. I'll say real quickly, the next level of this is that the exhibitors need to, do their part in driving people to their booth. That's obviously done by content. That's done, as Michelle said, having interesting things pre-show, during show that show people, hey, this is what you're missing. It's like fear of missing out, right?
Yeah.
But we also, as organizers, need to help arm the exhibitors with the information that enables them to do this. We tried something a lot different this year, because we're virtual for the first time in our history, and we provided webinars to exhibitors. So, I mean, we can't expect people to go in and know our platform right off the bat. They need at least 3 months to prepare, at least 2 weeks to get your booth ready, right? So we need to take that on and provide the information to the exhibitors that enables them to drive those booth visits as well.
Yeah. Actually, just one comment on this that comes to mind. I've seen, what I've really enjoyed is within a virtual environment where, not like banner ads, disruptive banner ads, but linking what might be available somewhere else in the agenda while you're in a talk. So like a good example would be, we're in a webinar now, but if this was part of a virtual experience, if we might have another session coming up or a great video sponsored by one of the exhibitors that talks about creating simple content with something, it can be purposely brought up to the audience at that time, like what you might find on this subject over in another area of this virtual environment. And one of those can be the exhibition floor. So I've seen some fantastic work with, again, organizers saying, how can we work with the sponsors to highlight what is available in the virtual booth or their personal sessions when they're running their own webinars, et cetera, et cetera. So there's this, so also being in the environment is like constant awareness of what else is going on and how to get there. That's the key thing. If you think about great web design, it's strategically placed call to actions that lead you to the next thing you might be interested in. Well, that's what the virtual environment should be, in my opinion. And I'd like to see more of this from organizers as well, thinking not just let's allow them to build it, but let's give them ways to give messaging that explains what's available. And as I say, it doesn't just apply to the virtual exhibition booths. It can apply to anything within the environment. But I think this works well.
And I think that goes back to our last question of getting people to engage in chat. If we've given them a call to action and they're coming with a question, a very tangible question.
Right. Yeah. Well, and actually, we'll get on a little bit of a roll here, but Michelle, you and I also spoke about not giving them all the information in your content. Yeah. So give them enough
like an onion.
And then also don't give them the full, data dump. So then now that you've got them watching a short video, it also answers 60-80% of their questions, and you purposely design it that way, because then they get that little trigger up here to say, I should probably talk to somebody and just get that answered, right? So don't give them everything. Hold some stuff back.
People like to do their own research, and they like to be in the lead. They want to explore a little and then take the initiative to go a little deeper and then to talk. Like if you walk into a store and you need a white button-down shirt and someone immediately approaches you and says, how can I help you? And you say, I'm just looking. You need a white shirt.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like also, if what is it they say? If the communication is anticipated, it's immediately discounted. And that applies in marketing, right? So we have to understand people's behaviors, and then kind of puppet master them in the way that we want them to go, right, with the appropriate call to actions and things. So really good point there.
Yeah, I just wanted to move on. We've had a good question come in about from Dario asking, how can we deal with giveaways at virtual events? And I know we talked about this a little bit yesterday. Andy, I'll come to you first. I just wanted to get a quick tip for sales and marketing professionals who are going to these events, like our audience today. What's a tip you would give them from when attending virtual events, maybe to do with giveaways and how they can adapt their strategies?
This, in my opinion, is a great way to provide that human touch in a virtual world, right? So one example would be understanding personally, or from a company perspective, who might be going to the show. Maybe you do a survey in advance. Are you going? We're going to be there. For those that say yes, send them something in advance, and then say, come to our webinar. Bring your mug. Bring your T-shirt. Join us in a networking event where we're going to launch some information or share some information about a new product. But invite them to participate as a human being, not just online as a virtual being. And so merch or swag, whatever we call it, is an opportunity to get that. And I love the idea of doing it in advance. So it's not that well, thanks for stopping by, here's your pen feeling, which is great. Gifts are great, but we can't do that instantaneously. So we have to plan. This is either something we're going to give to you in advance to say, we see you, we recognize you, we appreciate you. You're part of our tribe, we know who you are, and we want you to continue learning about our products and our services. Or after, right? Create some exclusive experience, some content, some event that they need to participate in, and say, for those that are here, we're looking to, fill out this survey in response to what we're saying, and then we can send you something to show how appreciative we are. But I think that's the way giveaways need to be structured, as a pre or post strategy that lure people in. But the biggest motivator should be making people feel good and reminded it's like, we do business with people and I see you. And a good quality merch actually creates that opportunity right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Michelle, would you add anything to that, or give a top tip for sales and marketing pros attending these events?
Sure. I think it's a really good idea, good way to inject some fun and to differentiate. It would be easy to do e-gift cards or something like that, but it's one more email. If you think about it as a touch point, I would lean heavily on local small business, on whatever is important to your culture. I have one instrumentation company who has a laser shark theme going on, and so going with this small business shark hot sauce, because you can mail it and it creates another touch point and another tangible experience 2 weeks after the show.
Yeah.
Whatever it is true to your brand and your people, it's a good way to stick out.
Yeah. I really like the local business idea. That's nice. because then again, we're saying we know where you are, or we know who you are, or here's sharing something about where we're from.
Our community.
Right? Yeah, our community. So very, very cool idea. Yeah.
It's the year to bring back the handwritten note.
Yeah.
Anything that is real and human and a different sort of sensory experience.
Yeah. Hadn't even crossed my mind to think about that. That's a good one. Rocco, what about you? Any tips you'd give sales and marketing professionals?
I'm writing this down because that was a terrific handwritten notes and the local businesses. We were looking at the logistics of sending something out because in the end, like both of you said, it's the human element where we're so virtual, we're so disconnected, yet we're so tethered to our screens right now. It's so nice to be able to get something tangible that at least reminds you, harkens back to the days where we could do this face to face. It's terrific stuff. Rarely am I speechless, and I'm sitting here writing these ideas down. So we may have to talk after this about some of these.
For sure.
Nice. And just before we sort of summarize, we're just going to launch the third poll, which should be coming up on the screen any moment now. And we're just going to ask, how much would you typically spend on your virtual event presence? Which will bring us on to the next question. But before we do that, we've had a comment in from Jill. So a comment, not a question. She's put, a big measure of our success was the number of people who chose to share their information on the platform in order to participate in the networking and matchmaking. So they marketed with that aspect as much as they did the science and exhibition itself. Engagement was the key for them, which brings us nicely on to the sort of the penultimate question about how can we determine whether or not these events were a success? Michelle, I'll come to you first. How can I, as a marketer attending PitCon next month, say whether or not the event was a success? Might have lost Michelle, so Andy, I might come to you instead.
Oh, she's back on, I think. Now.
She's back.
All right.
You have me?
We do.
Got you. So yeah, Michelle, I was just commenting about the marketers proving that they've had a successful event, getting their ROI. How can they go about doing that?
Sure. Well, traditionally sales cycles are long, so I would set stage gates, KPIs, a few months out that you can measure, 6 months out. And those could be leads, qualified leads. Engagement record metrics are really important. How many
I think we've lost her again. Andy, would you, I don't really get so much fun there, would you add anything to how we can determine success?
Well, we talked about this actually in a podcast a bit ago, like how, the one benefit about virtual is it is, it's designed for collecting market intelligence and reporting more accurately on it than you could possibly ever do in person. So I think first and foremost, when you sign up to go to a virtual event, I'll answer this as obviously the exhibitor, is ask what's going on the platform in terms of what can be tracked, what can be reported on, how do I get at this data, build that into your strategy for how you're going to look at some measure of ROI on content consumption. And this is why great content is so important, is it is an indication of people being market qualified leads, if you will. They're clearly browsing and they're spending their time with you versus someone else because they're interested. So this data is really valuable. But I would say the other thing to look at with a meeting is the call to actions you're building in to demonstrate to those individuals what's next if you're interested with us. So think about how you can measure behaviors that might come outside of the platform. Because the reality is that is an objective of any company, no different than in an in-person meeting, right? I collect your information, but then our journey continues when we all go home. So the efficacy of your CTAs, your call to actions, need to be part of your metrics and reporting, which means you need to set these up and consider how you're going to do this. This could be engaging in scheduling a meeting through a tool like Calendly or Schedule Once or Microsoft Bookings, whatever tool you use. It's a third-party tool you can typically integrate to a virtual platform, and you can look at how many meetings did we book. Going back to my webinar example, How many people can we meet at this virtual event as qualified leads, quality leads that we didn't know, or maybe we already know them, but it's a new touch point. And then how many of those did we channel to another experience a week to 3 weeks later? So this is what I think goes into, is this a successful endeavor and investment? Is how many, what was the engagement within the environment that the environment can report onto us? And then what was our success in migrating people to the next step? The key thing that companies need to remember is that everyone is not a buyer immediately, though. And this goes back to just content marketing 101. You do have people at the top of the funnel that are learning, and they're in a learning stage, and that's where they need to be. So be looking at them as, how are they continuing to learn? They're not giving you indications of buying yet. In your middle of funnel, now you're looking at more awareness and solutions about their particular applications, their needs. So if you're garnering that information, okay, great. And obviously the third one is indication of buying, right? What business could we do together? How can we solve your problems? So the metrics might be quotes, right? Leads, or however you track opportunities in your CRM, etc. So it should be looking at that across the board.
Yeah, but like you touched on, the data is really, really exciting for marketers. The opportunities you can understand about people's behavior is huge, and such a thing that you don't get necessarily with when someone just walks past your booth and face to face. So that's the main advantage. Rocco, I just wanted to come. Sorry, Andy, go on.
I was just going to say, sorry. One other thing, going back to that point about the virtual event is a campaign. For marketers trying to sell the ROI to managers and say, why should we do this again? Remember to include those analytics as well. If I were trying to sell this to someone, I would say, and then look at all the additional emails and social activity we were able to generate because we were committed to going to the show. We increased our communications to our subscriber database by X. We created what we feel is a higher degree of subscribers to our channels or our newsletters because we had more to talk about because we were doing more in our industry. So I would say there's argument to look at the campaign also outside of what came from the virtual event itself and say, how has enabled us to do more? And what's that worth? That's an important thing to report on.
Yeah, absolutely. The poll results are showing the vast majority of people investing between $1,000 and $5,000. So Rocco, will bring you in. That could be quite a bit less than if you're doing in-person events when you take in flights, hotels, time off work, everything else that's included with that. So from your point of view, it's almost easier to prove a return on investment when you're not investing as much money. How would you say, what would you add to this point?
I think that in face-to-face, you're looking at high quantities of visitors that you can't really track who's interacting with what, right? Unless they're speaking to a person, unless you scan that badge that they all have with your, the phone app that you get. The benefit of this is that maybe it's going to be a higher quality of visitor too, because they are choosing really to visit that booth. That's not to say that there isn't, we would all like to see high traffic, period, in all of these things. But, people are choosing to interact with different elements of your booth. They're choosing to visit your booth in particular in a lot of these virtual expo floors. I think that the biggest advantage, though, is like Andy touched on, you can track who's interacted with different elements of your booth. And that, in the end, to me, is like it's like an informal survey. It's, for me as an exhibitor, I would be, who's interacting with this piece? What actually got the most interaction from that? So even if these, there's ROI beyond the conversations that you're having with people. There's ROI beyond the sales. There's marketing information ROI that I think comes with this this virtual world. And as a marketer, that is, the salespeople might disagree with me on this, but as a marketer, that's enormous because that will augment future sales, strategies. And that's just streamlining, the whole marketing effort in the end. That's exciting. I just got a chill thinking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited too. We were talking about all the data and everything yesterday, and we're really looking forward to PitCon and to the other events we'll be attending later in the year. Just final question for me, and if I could ask each of you just to keep it as brief as possible, so we can tackle some of these audience questions as well. What is the future of conferences? Michelle, I think you're back with us now. I'll come to you first. What is the future of conferences, do you think?
I am. There's no replacing the face-to-face from live conferences, but I do think we'll be back to hybrid because there will be some benefit to this virtual element. As you think about diversifying your audience, diversifying who you can attract as employees, we can bring in so many more people to the tech series to become involved and engaged with an association. It reduces that burden of travel. And for a long time, trade shows were burning out great salespeople. This gives all of us a bit more time with our families, makes it more approachable to engage more often with the right associations in the industry. So from a diversity of STEM, I think it's got a lot of benefit.
Yeah, I'd agree 100%. I think there is going to be a requirement, if you will, for societies to really consider how can we offer virtual with in-person so that we can be drawing in and providing a better opportunity or more opportunities for those that might not be able to travel to really get involved. And that's a win-win for everybody. So I would be surprised if any large organizations or show organizations said, oh, well, we're just going back to in-person because we miss it, or we're really thirsty for it. And people will be, they will. It's just good business practice to say, no, we're going to keep this virtual machine moving and continue to develop it. Because as we do it more, we'll all get better at it. We'll all get more comfortable at it. And then we actually, so this is going back to that mindset, our online habits and culture will evolve, and ultimately it'll get better and better and better, just like in-person meetings did. They evolved over time and they became much more complex than I imagined they were before I was in the industry. So how an in-person, how a PitCon, Rocco, would be is you start planning a year or two in advance, I'd imagine, for the next one, possibly 3, because there's just so many moving parts. So definitely hybrid, I think, 100%.
Yeah, I think that to touch on what you said, Michelle, this enables us to access a greater diversity of participants, of exhibitors, startup companies, whatever, students who are future purchasers. It's enabling us to access what is becoming more representative of the field of any virtual conference. In ours, it's analytical chemistry. It's enabling us to bring what our purpose is, which is scientific collaboration, to a wider audience. It's an immense opportunity. I agree that it's obviously here to stay. And we have to look at it as in the realm of product innovation. I think that we're looking at a new, the propensity for a new product, if done right, the propensity to have, I like to say off season, PitCon is a certain time of year. Is there a means to have an off season sort of virtual program? Maybe, that's something that it's exciting. It's enabling us to access an entire new world of people, not just, within diversity of STEM, but we're looking at virtual being something that doesn't necessarily conform to time and space. And I'm not trying to, sound like I know what physics is that much, but essentially people can access virtual. What I mean is they can access a virtual show, especially if it's on demand. They can still access the information within it anytime, 24 hours a day, for as long as it's available, and anywhere that has internet connection. And that's exciting. That's exciting.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rocco, just for anyone who's listening who might be interested in attending PitCon, you're still taking registrations?
Oh, by all means. We are taking registrations. You can register for PitCon, which is live March 8th through 12th. So we're 2.5 weeks away, and it's live in those dates, but we are also on demand. So though we would love to see everyone there live, because that just supports the collaborative environment that we're offering this year, that we offer every year, but this year it's just virtual. The benefit of registering is that if you can't see a lecture on electrophoresis or spectroscopy or something, you can come back. You can schedule that lecture. You can come back March 17th, and you can watch that. It's really going to be exciting. I saw some questions in there about PitCon, so I'm looking forward to answering those as we go further here too.
Yeah, so that's what we'll do now. We'll just quick fire a few questions. I know we've come to an hour now, so thank you to everyone for giving up their time. But if you can hold on with us for 5 more minutes, we'll just address these questions. Michelle, I'm going to come to you first with one from Daria. It's a question about internal motivation. So it's a really important one, I think. She's asking what to do when in-house experts are not motivated to dedicate time and effort to virtual events due to either a bad prior experience or lack of trust in virtual events. How do you sell the idea to participate internally?
Some of it's separating out what's uncomfortable and what's skeptical. Skeptical's warranted, but if you can define those metrics with them, you'll get some buy-in. What do we want out of this? And some of it's training. You trained booth staff. I think there's a gap in training for participating here too. It's a different behavior. If you can be clear in what you want to see from them, they'll be more willing.
Yeah, Andy, and I'll come to you with this one from Elizabeth asking, how do you get your sales teams, employees to buy in? So similar to what Dario was saying, to buy in and participate more during virtual events.
Exactly what Michelle said. To understand where the hesitancy is coming from, bad experience. So spend time learning. Be upfront about why the company is committing to these strategies. Remind them that they need to be a team player. That's part of employment. But then provide them that training, that experience. Don't do the whole because I said so. Do it. That never really works with anything. But listen to your staff and then bring them into the conversation as well about the strategy. I think that's another thing is I see sometimes in management, it's just like very bluntly said, well, this is what we've decided to do. We know it's going to be good, rah, rah, rah. And maybe we need to be a little bit more, well, this is what this platform provides. This is the analytics we can get. So we want sales to work with marketing to create great videos and R&D, and we want to really present ourselves and the expertise at our company. So you're ultimately selling it internally. And then providing, Michelle, I think that's right on point, like training. Just appreciate that not everyone is comfortable. They might not be comfortable presenting online with a webcam like we're doing right now, just because it's unfamiliar. But if they have some practice and some coaching and some encouragement, they'll become familiar and comfortable. People know how to talk to people if they're standing in a booth and someone walks by. It's natural. So training is such a good point.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Rocco, there's one here about PitCon specifically. So Jason's asked, what are the gamification and visitation points of the PitCon exhibition?
Gamification is, I've seen it in a lot of shows, not every show. It's something that, helps to make the attendee experience a lot of fun. I don't think more competitive, but a lot of fun. And I think it's something that exhibitors enjoy that drives people to their booths in the end. It keeps you engaged in the environment. So what is it? It's, we have a survey in PitCon. It's our survey. It's in our PitCon Central main booth. Taking that survey, completing it, gives you points. Finding little things in a scavenger hunt. We have one that's an apple, which an apple has been associated with PitCon since 1978. Find the apple, click on it, get points, find out what the apple means. I won't give it away now. It's also enabling, if you visit an expo, if you visit a certain area, you get points. And in the end, we have some really, really great prizes that I wish I could win. but I've been told I'm not allowed. One of the prizes, AirPods, right? I could use those. There's just a bunch of really cool, unique prizes that we're giving away in PitCon, and that's really just to make it. It's again adding experience to this whole virtual environment, right? Adding a little bit of a human element. It's something unique to virtual. We wouldn't have a scavenger hunt in live PitCon. I don't know if that's been tried before, but yeah, it's going to be.
Never know.
Yeah. So from the exhibitor standpoint, this is a mechanism to draw people into, again, we want people to stay in the environment so they're more apt to visit all aspects of the environment. But from the attendee side, it's also, it's providing that little extra element that said, hey, we didn't just put this up. We've really put a lot of time into this. And in the end, I don't want to, be sappy, but we care what people are experiencing in our virtual environment. This is an aspect of that.
Yeah, I just jump in. So the final question that came in was from Gregory, who's basically he's attending a virtual event at the moment, and he's saying the organizers have tried to make it too big and it's crashed and it's become a complete disaster. So he's recommending that keeping it small and focused. But I guess what you're saying is that you've put all the preparation in. Obviously, technical issues sometimes happen, but as we've seen today, but with the preparation, then you're expecting no issues like that, I'm sure.
Oh my gosh, I sincerely hope not. But I know that we've put a lot of preparation in from the work we've done with our platform provider, which is LabRoots, to installing and getting a faster and more, I don't know the term, but just a higher internet here at our offices, installing things to the point of, we have internet boosters for wireless internet. I know, Danny, you and the AZO team can attest to this because we've been on things before where the connection's been bad, and look, we haven't had issues today. I think it's also a matter of logistics. I think that, if you're looking to put a bunch of, elements up there, lectures up there, well, maybe these shows only existed for a few days too. Maybe they didn't consider that, hey, things can be on demand and people need to have the time to look at everything. We're a massive conference. We have 1,350 presentations at PitCon this year. That's on par. That's close to what we have in a live show. It's a lot to deal with. There's a lot going on, but we're running the checks, and we've put everything in place to make sure that this thing goes off well, and that people in the end also have time to schedule, to plan, to put into their in-show briefcase, their scheduler, what they want to see, not just for a week, but until June 12th for 3 whole months. Yeah. I think that there's management on both sides there that are really benefiting from this being virtual this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. We will wrap things up there. I know we've run slightly over, so thank you to the audience for sticking with us and for tuning in today from across the world, and to our fantastic guests for sharing their thoughts. So thank you to Michelle, to Andy, and to Rocco for sharing their knowledge and time with us. AZO Network will be exhibiting throughout virtual PitCon in March, so please do take the time to come visit our booth, which will be slightly better by then, and have a chat with myself and the rest of the team. You can connect and reach out to any of today's speakers on LinkedIn. You can find the links to their pages in the resources section, along with some other resources that will help support your marketing efforts. A final reminder that this is the second in a 6-part marketing science series. The next event will be on the 31st of March. That will be all about webinar features and functions, how to engage a scientific audience. You can register for that by clicking the link that should be coming across the screen now. Also, a survey will appear on your screen when you finish today, so please do give us your thoughts and feedback. We'd really appreciate that. So thanks again, Michelle. Thanks, Andy. Thank you. Rocco, great to have you all with us today. Really enjoyed the chat, and we'll see everyone again very soon.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.